Personal finance practice problem using Excel. Future value, annuity investment versus non-annuity. Prepare to get financially fit by practicing personal finance. Here we are in our Excel worksheet. If you have access to the Excel worksheet, would like to follow along, note that we're down here in the practice tab as opposed to the example tab. The example tab, in essence, being an answer key. Information on the left-hand side, going to populate that into the blue area on the right-hand side, comparing and contrasting two different investment type of scenarios, one in which we have the one investment that we're going to say is compounding interest annually to see where we will be at some future point. The second, we're imagining we're putting more money in each time period. That would be the annuity type of situation to see then where we will be at some future point. So first one will be similar to what we have seen in the past. We'll probably do it a little bit more quickly, therefore, as we then move on to the new thing, the annuity thing. So the investment of the 1,000, the years, 8 years, the return we're going to say is 11% annual compounded. Where will we be then in terms of future value after the 8-year time period? Then we'll compare that to an investment each year of 1,000 for 8 years, rate of return at the 11%. Now note that these two are not comparable in the sense that we're putting much different dollar amounts in for both of them. The first one we're putting 1,000 in, seeing the growth in terms of interest. The second one we're going to be putting $8,000 in over 8 years, but we have the comparison between an annuity kind of situation and a future value of one type of situation. Okay, let's start off with the first one. We'll do this a bit more quickly because we've seen this one, a similar one in the past to it. So we're going to have our number of years. We'll do this with a running balance, and then with the functions in Excel, then using tables, and then using a mathematical formula. Let's start off with the running balance. So I'm going to say 0, 1, 2. I'm going to copy that down. So I'm going to select these items, going to go to the autofill handle down below and drag that down. We're going to do this a bit faster this time, so bear with me. If you want to do it slowly, you can take a look at the prior practice problems and we'll slow it down a bit there. We're going to go to the Home tab. We're going to go to the alignment. We're going to indent it. And then we're going to be calculating. And this, I'm going to call this the interest here. I'm going to call it an increase because it could be interest and it could depend on the type of investment as to what that increase format will be looking like. The investment amount is going to be equal to, we're going to pick up the 1,000 at time period 0. And then we're going to calculate the interest, which will be that 1,000 times the 11% in the first period. So it's going to be equal to, right up, the 1,000 times the 11%. Now that 11% is outside of the table, so I know when I copy it down, which we will do this time, the first time, I need to make that absolute reference. So I'm going to do that by selecting F4 on the keyboard, putting a $sign before the B and 3. You only need a mixed reference, but an absolute reference works, telling Excel, do not move that cell down when I copy it down. All other cells that are inside the same table typically will need to be copied down, which is the default setting when copying and pasting formulas. So this is going to be equal to the one above it, 1,000, plus the one to the left, which is going to be the 110. That'll give us the 1,110. I'm going to go ahead and just copy that down this time. I'm just going to select these two. We're going to put our cursor on the fill handle and just autofill all the way down. Autofill it down. There we have it. Double click on the last one down here just to double check. See if it does what we think it should. It does indeed do what we think it does need to do. And there it is. So we're at the 2304. If we do our running balance, we can see the increase in the interest compounding as we go. Let's hide some cells and then do it with the other formats here, including the tables and the Excel functions. I'm going to put my cursor on the D drop down, going to drag to the left all the way to D to G, let go, right click the selected area and hide that information. And then we'll do our calculation in the future value calculation. So we're going to do this with an Excel formula, which will take us right to that ending balance equals the future value FV. We can double click on the FV or hit Shift 9. I'm going to try to do this with the keyboard. So all with the keyboard, we're going to say left, 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 right. Then I'm going to hit comma. And then we have the number of periods, which is going to be left, 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 8 on the periods. And then comma, there is no payment because this is not an annuity, but a future value of 1. Next time we will have an annuity and therefore we'll be using that payment item, which you might be asking about at this point, why don't we ever use that one? We haven't done an annuity, I don't believe yet. So if we haven't, then we haven't used that one yet, but we will shortly, and you'll get to see that. So there we have it, the 2304. Let's flip the sign by double clicking on it. We can put a negative in front of either the present value. I like to put it in front of the entire function, flipping the sign to 2003.05. Let's do it with the tables. We should get to the tables. We can do the same thing here. This is what would happen if you were doing it in a school setting. This is going to be equal to the 1,000. They might take away your calculator, take away your Excel, and just give you this table to work with. And we'll say, all right, do it this way if we have to. If I have to. 11% and 8 is what we're looking for. So 11% and 8 periods. So 11%, 8 periods is going to be down here at the 2.3045, 2.3045, 2.3045, 2.3045. And then we'll add some decimals. Home tab, number group, decimalizing it, adding some decimals. And then we're going to say home tab fonts group underline, and that'll give us our future value. I'll just call it FV future value. Let's multiply that out. This equals up to the 1,000 times up 1, the 2.3045 to give us the 2305 matching what we got up top. Let's do it again with the formulas now. To do so, let's hide some cells. Let's hide some columns to get our data right next to where we're going to do the input of the data. Putting our cursor on the H drop down, left clicking, dragging over to J, H to J, H to J, letting go, right clicking on the columns, and then hiding those columns. Now we've got our data right next to where we want our formula calculation now, the formula being future value equals the present value times 1 plus r to the n. I'm going to put that in a table type of format as we have seen in the past, trying to get the outer column to be equal to these two components. Any subcalculations on the inside similar as to what you would see in a tax return calculation possibly, or financial statement kind of setup. So we're going to say this is going to be the present value in the outer column equal to the starting point of the 1,000. We'll got the subcalculation, which will be then the 1 plus r to the n periods, colon, representing that it will be a subcalculation. We're going to say 1, and then the rate is going to be equal to, I'm going to pull this from our data as we've seen in the past, the 11%, enter. Got to make that a percent so we can see it. Home tab, number, you could add decimals, but I like to then percentify it, making it a percent. Home tab, font group, and underline. Let's do a subtotal here, which is 1 plus the rate. Using the trusty sum function equals SUM, shift 9, up arrow, holding down shift, up again to sum it up with the keyboard, and enter. Let's add some decimals there. Home tab, font group, couple decimals to get us to the 1.11 or percentize it, making it 111%. We'll take that to n periods then, to n periods, and that's going to be then periods of 8 periods up top. Let's underline that by going to the home font and underline, and that's going to give us then our whole subtotal here, which would be 1 plus the rate, shift 9, caret, shift 6, periods. And in the outer column then, this is going to be equal to left up, the 111%, shift 6, caret to 8 periods to the power of 8. And then we're going to add some decimals here so we can see some more detail. Home tab, numbers, adding some decimals, decimalizing it. And then we're going to go to the font group and underline. So there we have it. And that'll give us our end value finally. I thought we were doing this fast. I thought we were doing this. Okay, so this is going to be equal to up, the 1,000 times the decimalized number. And so there we have it. So there's the 2305 about once again. Okay, so now let's do the new thing, which is to do this one down here, an annuity calculation as a comparison. So we have the data repeated on the right. So I'm going to hide all the columns from N all the way back so that we can just work with this data over here. So I'm going to put my cursor on N, drag all the way back. You don't have to do this, by the way, because the data's right here, but it might be a little bit easier to do this. And then I'm going to hide, right-click, and hide. So there we have it. Now I have a little bit of a problem. These two calculations are now on top of each other, but that's okay. We're looking at this annuity calculation here. And so now we're on the second set of data. It's the same as the top set of data, except that now we have this happening every year. So now we're imagining the 1,000 being a payment that we're adding to our investment each year. So we're saying, okay, I'm going to put more into it each year, kind of like if you're saving for retirement or something like that, and you're adding more money to it, and it's got interest that's compounding on it, complexitizing things, making things more complex, I should say. So that's how English goes. Okay, so 1, 2. I'm not going to start off at 0 here with the annuity. I'm just going to start off with 1 and then drag this down. So we'll first think of our annuity with regards to our table once again. So we're going to do our table. We're going to go to the Home tab, Alignment, and Center. Now note, when we think about the annuity, oftentimes the first thing we got to think about is usually like a normal annuity. You think about the payment happening at the end of the period, which kind of confuses things because oftentimes you start the annuity with the payment, today. So you got to realize that, when you do the annuity calculation, that you're talking about a series of payments that happens at a set interval, and usually that interval is at the end of the period. If you're talking years, it would be at the end of the year. So we're not going to start with period 0 here with an initial investment. In this case, we're going to say the annuity happens, and that usually is going to be, again, starting kind of at the end of the period. So I could put the first payment here in either the payment column or the investment column at period 1. And I'm going to say this equals the 1,000. And then I'm going to start calculating the increase or interest if it was an interest-bearing type of investment on that 1,000 starting in period 2. So note, if you're off, it's probably because you're kind of messing up that first interval, the first year, and you got to take that into consideration and when you're thinking about your actual calculations and whatnot. And if you have a more complex calculation where you have a starting point that you're putting in and then the annuity on top of it, then you could adjust your calculation, either saying that you got that initial investment plus the annuity, or you can try to format or adjust the annuity so that the annuity happens, basically the payments happen at the beginning of the period. Okay, so now we're gonna say then, let's do our calculation for the standard annuity starting off here. This is gonna be equal to the 1,000 investment, and then we're gonna multiply that times the rate, so times left, and I'm gonna bring it down to this 11 down here, and enter. So it's going to be going up year 1 or in year 2 by that 110% again. And then we're going to say but we're also going to have another payment, which I could pull from the left over here, or I could pull up above because the payments are always going to be the same. I'm going to calculate this one a few more times before we simply just copy it down. And then this one gets a little bit more tricky when we do our running balance, because it's going to be the prior balance of the 1,000 we had before, plus the new payment, plus the interest. So we can do that by saying the 1,000, let's do it this way. I can show you, it could be this plus left, this plus left, that, or probably more commonly entered, I'm going to delete that, as equals the one above it plus the sum, S-U-M, of the two items to the left. The sum of those two. So we're just adding the 2 to the left and the 1 above it for our running balance. It's going to close it up, the brackets for me. There's the 2,110. So then we can calculate the increase again, and now of course we've got another $1,000 in there instead of just the compounding of the interest plus the interest compounding. So now it's going to be equal to the 2,110 times the 11%. Plus, we got another 1,000 equals the 1,000. We will copy this down later. You can copy it down. So we'll do that soon. And this will equal the 1 above it plus the sum of, and then I'm going to say the ones to the left, holding down Shift, selecting those two, closing up the brackets, and enter. Let's do it again. This is going to be equal to the 3,342 times the 11%, enter. This will be the 1,000 payment that we're going to be making on an annual basis, adding to it. This is going to be equal to the investment we had before, plus the SUM sum, Shift 9, left arrow. I'm going to select these two, holding down Shift, Control 0, closing up. Let's do it a couple more times. This equals the 4,710 times the 11%. This is going to be equal to the 1,000. And this is going to be equal to the one before plus the SUM shift 9 left arrow holding down shift left arrow again holding down shift and 0 to close up the brackets and enter. Okay, one more time. This equals the 6228 times the 11%. This equals the 1,000. This equals the one above it plus the SUM shift 9 left arrow once holding down shift left again shift 0 closing up the brackets, and there we have it. Now I'm going to delete the entire thing and do it again, keeping in mind that we want to basically copy this whole thing down. How could we do that? I'm going to select this whole thing, delete it. No, it's okay, because we're going to do it the fast way this time, the easy way. So this is going to be equal to the 1,000 times the 11%. Now, right away, I see that 11% is outside the table. That means I'm visualizing that I'm going to need to make that absolute. I won't do it yet. And then this one is going to be equal to the 1,000. That one's not going to change either. I can pull that from outside the table again. The fact that it's outside the table means that if I need to copy it down, I'm probably going to have to make that an absolute reference. And then this one is going to be equal to the one above it plus the SUM shift 9 to the left, holding down shift left again, closing up the brackets. That's a complicated formula, but it's all within Excel. So if I copy this down and say, well, what's going to go wrong here? I'm going to select these, autofill it down. So something went wrong here because that moved down, and something's going to go wrong here because this moved down. I want to keep it at the 1,000. So the items outside the table, I need to make absolute, in other words. So I'm going to delete this, double click on our 110, that 11% in P7, put our cursor in P7, select F4, $ before the P and 7. You only need a mixed reference, but absolute work. And then I'll do the same thing for this one. This one's in the table, outside of our data table here. So we're going to say F4, saying don't move that down. I want that whole column to be 1,000, and enter. Then I'll usually select these three, autofill it one time just to double check before I go all the way. And then I'm going to double click here and say, does it do what I want? It does. Does it do what we're supposed to do here? It does. Does it do what it's supposed to do here? Indeed, it does do the thing that we told it to do. So now let's put our cursor on the autofill and drag it all the way down. And there we have it. So we're at the ending result, 11,859. The amount of payments that we put in, of course, are the 8,000. So we actually put in 8,000 every year to get, and then we have the interest that increase, or whatever the increase is, at the 3,859. It'll depend on what type of investment we have. Okay, so now let's do that the easy way with the Excel function, which will jump to this dollar amounts down here, but again, doesn't give you anywhere near the detail of a running balance table like this, which I highly recommend being able to do. Even when you talk to financial people to help you out with it, they're just going to get to this number, and if they probably don't have a good visualization of what is actually happening a lot of times in their mind. Oftentimes table helps. Let's go ahead and hide these columns by putting our cursor on R to V, the RV. Let's hide the RV. We're going to hide the RV. It's kind of big to hide the RV. Okay, we're going to right click on it and hide it, hiding the RV, R2V. Okay, so then we're going to do the future value of the annuity calculation. Here's where we get to use that payment part now. So it's the same starting point as the last future value. You can double click or hit Shift 9, and it starts out the same. So it starts out the same, which is deceiving, but then there's a twist or a difference. And then we're going to say comma. So this isn't where the twist is yet. Number of periods, this is the same. It's still the same. Here's the twist. Here's the difference. The number of payments, now we use it because the payment means that we have repetitive payments that are happening each time for each of the 8 periods that we have assigned. So we're going to say, all right, now we have a payment. We get to use that thing. And then we're not going to use the present value this time because you usually kind of use one or the other here. We have payments, not a present value. So I'm going to just say the payment that we have. And notice this is like a normal standard annuity. There could be variance again if you had a payment at period 0, which we might talk about in a future presentation, but normal kind of annuity. So we're going to close this up and enter. There we have it. We have the same situation here where it's a negative number. If I double click on that, you could fix that by putting your payment amount, making it negative, which is probably the more proper way, but I like to just put a negative in front of the F. And there we have 11,858. There we have it. Now let's do it with the formula, which is kind of a more intense way of doing it because the formula gets messy down here. So just note that if you're at a school that makes you use this formula, then you know they're being kind of unkind if you have to do that in a test question situation. But we'll do it. We can do it. We can do it. So I'm going to go ahead and hide some columns. We're going to be hiding from W to Y, Y, W, Y, Y. So then we're going to right click and then hide those. Okay, so now let's do this. So now we've got our formula. So here's a little bit more complex looking formula here. It's going to be the future value equals the periodic payment, which is a $1,000 payment that is now not really the present value as P was determined to be before, but periodic payments times 1 plus the rate, which is the 11%, to the number of periods, which is 8, minus 1 over R, which is 11%. Now you could just type this in algebraically. I'm going to try to build our table with this again, noting that this is a complex kind of formula to build in like a table type of setting. So I'm going to kind of make a tax return kind of setting with it, noting that I want to have this two kind of components that we multiply together in the outer column. And then I would like to have the numerator and denominator and more complexity happening on the inner columns. And that's generally how you can basically put a longer kind of function or algebraic equation into Excel in a similar way as you might see in like a tax return or on like financial statements. So let's just practice that. I know it's kind of tedious, but let's do it because it'll be fun. So now we're going to say we have the payment or the payments, which are going to be in the outer column. This is going to be equal to the 1,000. And then I'm going to pick on the numerator, which is going to be this item here. So I'm going to pick the numerator. So I'll just call it the numerator, and I'm going to say that this is going to be the 1 plus R to the N. So I'm going to just start off with 1, and then I'm going to type in the rate, which is R. I'm going to pick that up by saying equals and make sure we pick it up from our data. I'm going to basically make that, we'll make that a percent, home tab, numbers. We could add decimals, 0.11, or percentize it, making it a percent. 11%, font group, and underline it. Let's put a subtotal in that calculation right there. Looks like a good place for subtotal. Subtotal, using the trusty sum function, equals the SUM, shift 9, up arrow, holding down shift, up again, hold it, and then close up the brackets. We don't really need to close up the brackets, but you can. And then we're going to go home tab, number group. That'll give us 101.11 or percentizing it 111%. And then we'll take that to the number of periods, which was N, otherwise known as N here. So we're taking that to the power of N. That's where we are in the calculation, to the power of N, N power, which is 8. And then we're going to go to the home tab, font group, and underline. And let's calculate that subtotal. Let's do the subtotal right there. That looks like a good place for subtotal. Subtotal. So we're going to take the 111% caret N, which is 8, equals up to 111, shift 6, caret up once, and enter. And then we can add some decimals there in the subtotal. Home tab, numbers, decimalizing it. So we can see some detail by adding multiple decimals. And then we're going to say less, let's just say less 1 for finally rounding out the numerator here, minus 1. And then we're finally to the end of this thing. That's going to be the whole numerator. Numerator. Bringing this to the outer column is going to be equal to left, up, up. This thing minus that 1. Let's add some decimals there. Home tab, numbers, bunch of decimals, otherwise known as decimalizing. That cell has been decimalized. And then, so now I'm going to do some indentation. Let's go ahead and indent these. Let's select these items. Go to the home tab, alignment, indent, and we can indent this one. And then this one's going to be indented again. Let's go to the home tab, alignment, and indent this again. So there's the numerator, and then we have the denominator, which was simply the rate. So let's pick up the rate, which is 11%, equals the 11% That's this amount right there. There's the rate. Let's make that a percent by going to the Home tab, Numbers group. We could add decimals. There's the 11 or percentize it. And then go to the Home tab, Font group, and underline. And that'll give us then let's call this a subtotal, which is the numerator divided by the denominator, which we're going to put in the outer column so that we can then multiply P times this whole thing that we just calculated. So we'll put this in the outer column. This is going to be equal to the num divided by the denom, numerator over the denominator. And then we can add some decimals by going to the Home tab, Number group, decimalize it. And then that's going to give us the future value of the annuity. There it is. There it is. Right there. Hold on a second. Let's multiply this one up top. 1,000 times, which was P, the number of payments, times this decimalized number that we came to. And that'll give us the 11,859 about. So that was good times. Good times. Let's do it one more time, this time with the tables. So let's hide these cells and do it with the tables now. I'm going to hide from Z to this AD. I think that's going to be AD over here. Right click. We're on the double. We've worked so many things that we're on 2 letters. That's when you know you're doing good work right there. When you're all the way out. You're all the way out past 1. You've cleared the whole alphabet of work. We've been clearing the whole alphabet. So then this is going to be equal to the 1,000. We'll pull this amount up from the table. Remember that you got to make sure that you're picking up the right table. That's going to be the key component here. Future value of an annuity as opposed to future value of 1. And you'll see it because it'll of course be compounding a lot more quickly. Down here you'll see bigger numbers in the meat of the table. So we're going to be picking up then our data, which was 11% and 8 years. So we're still on the periods are in years and the rate is in years. So we're going to say, I forgot already, 11% and 8. 11% and 8 down here, that's going to be the 11.859, 11.859, 11.859, 11.859, 11.859. Let's add some decimals. Home tab, numbers, couple decimals there. 11.859. Wasn't it 859? 11.859. And then that's from the table. And that's going to give us our future value annuity, which is going to be equal to 1,000 times that table amount. And that gives us our 11,859, which is pretty much what we got before. So let's underline that. And there we have it. Okay, so let's unhide this and just recap it. So I'm gonna select from AE all the way over and see if I can unhide the whole thing. Right click and unhide and see if we didn't delete. Everything should come back. We didn't delete it, so it should all be there still. So there we have it. So we did our original investments with the annuity calculation. We got to the 2305, 2305 with Excel, 2305 with the tables, 2305 with the formula, and then we did the annuity, getting to the bottom line of 11,859 running balance. Although it's a bit more complicated to do the running balance, I think it's really worthwhile to do. We have the future value of an annuity using that payment cell now, still getting to the 11,859. Then we did it with a formula, getting to the 11,859, and then we did it with the tables, getting to the 11,859.